Hey, what's up guys, Zokley, and I'm going to be bringing you some more Norsca gameplay. Like I said in that last video, I wanted to play them a little bit more after having watched Turin's explanation video, so I've been fielding them a lot more, getting a lot of success in multiplayer. So I'm going to be sharing, like I said, a couple of battles. This first one is going to be against the Dark Elves, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. So let's start off with kind of what I was anticipating for this matchup. So the Dark Elves are going to have a lot of armor piercing, a fair amount of access to good elite units like, well, let's go take a look at his build. So yeah, he could have brought a fair amount of Hargoneth Executioners, could have brought Blackguard of Nagron. Both of these would have been pretty deadly in the sense that Blackguard of Nagron can chew up some of the big monsters from Norsca. Same thing with the Hargoneth Executioners, except for the infantry. They'll probably cut through a lot of the Berserkers and your frontline units. So that was something that I was a little bit worried about. So you can see that he has two of these Blackguard, which counters my monsters pretty good. And then his front line is actually not as heavy with kind of anti-infantry. There's Blackguard Corsairs, but then a bit cheaper with the Bleak Swords and one Executioner, so not too bad. But then the other thing you got to be worried from the Dark Elves as well is going to be monsters. So here he has the Charybdis unit, so oh man, I've never actually looked at it this close, looking really cool. But anyways, big monster I got to be fearful of. And then he does have a Dreadlord on a dragon. And to round this off, extra pieces, artillery, and these Raven Heralds, repeater crossbows mounted on Dark Pegasi. So this is an interesting pick against Norsca. Range units that can fly are going to be pretty much untouched in this matchup. Pretty interesting to bring that. But yeah, so what was I thinking in the matchup? Well, like I said, the main thing you have to fear from the Dark Elves, I should say, is going to be these big tanky units that can take out your monsters. So either in the form of Blackguard of Nagron, or perhaps some Dark Shards with shields, or anything that could kind of withstand your missile barrage and just answer in kind. Same thing with scary infantry. And yeah, monsters. So just recap of all that. So what I decided to bring in exchange is just something you'll often see Norscan players do, which is kind of an idea of just going wide. So what I've brought here is going to be a very, very wide front line of a bunch of these Marauders. So these axe infantry are decent. Their main advantage is that they can put a lot of numbers on the board for cheap, and they have shields, which means that they're pretty good if the enemy has some ranged contingents, which I was fearful of, so that you could just throw them up front and they'll soak up charges, and then they'll have enough of their numbers to clog up the front lines for long enough for you to get around the flank, which is going to be key. Now to reinforce this front line, usually what you'll do is you'll put a couple familiar warriors, sometimes with great weapons for more armor piercing. And anti-large if it's necessary. In this case, I was scared of bringing too many of these in case there was too many Blackguard of Nagron. So what I did is I just brought one to help reinforce the main line, and I put the rest of the money elsewhere. So let's see where I put it. Well, one is going to be in an extra Marauder Spearman. I was a little bit scared of the Dark Elf Cavalry, so I brought one of these just to buff up the line in the event that that happened. I also, instead of another Familiar Warrior, brought some Skin Wolves. Brought them with armor, again, just in the off chance that there were Dark Shards, but I brought these guys because they're going to be a bit faster than the Familiar, so I wanted to close the distance more quickly, get in and out more quickly, and so yeah, that was an important choice. And then, yeah, I wanted a bit more mobility, so that's why you can see me investing in Norscan Hounds. And here, Beast of Tashnar, these guys are pretty awesome in that they have a bonus versus large as well. So you can see I went with a bit more of like a mobile deployment here with the Skin Wolves, these Dire Packs, and some of the Regiment of Renown Warhounds. And then also, I'm going to introduce you to some of my chariot play. So we have here Wulfric the Wanderer on his chariot, and then on both flanks, I have even more chariots. So I have a Marauder Ice Wolves chariot next to some Norscan Ice Wolves themselves. So actually, let's see, this is kind of cool, making its way up the front line. And I have another pair of these on the other flank. So very, very quick mobile units. And here with the ability to frost the enemy is going to allow me to do some good strikes against the opponent, slow them down, and get out of there. So that'll be a pretty deadly combo. And then I also have backing them up Marauder Horsemen. So basically, this group here can knock up anything and slow them down, pinning them for a decent amount of time and are allowing the Marauder Horsemen to come in and do their damage. So get that on both sides, and I'm going to be moving very quickly to surround this smaller Elven force. So that's enough of a delay. Let's get into the action. So my opponent here is a little bit worried that I have just so many numbers to be able to surround him. This is going to come and button up his ranks. I got to be a little bit careful here as this artillery piece moves into position. Maybe an interesting pick, not necessarily one I would have brought, in that artillery pieces are susceptible to being overwhelmed and sniped. but it does bring you a good extreme range. So if he can pick the right target, it could get value for him. The problem is Norsca usually closes the distance pretty quickly, so this thing won't be that good. But for now, it's allowing him to keep me at arm's length. And I'm going to go ahead and pull back with my guys, stay out of range, or at least at extreme range, and wait until I have these units around the back. Meanwhile, he's going to send his Raven Heralds here, making a beeline for Wulfric the Wanderer. Unfortunately, I don't really have much of a counter to this. The only thing I could do would be to bravely maybe bring back my Marauder Horseman. But for now, I really don't have the ability to do that, so he's going to be sent to run away. And then here we go. We're going to try and snipe key units within his turtle formation. So the Marauder Horsemen here are going to start to get their javelins off at this dragon. And I don't care if he snaps up a man or two. The more I can pull him out of position, the better, because it's going to open up opportunities for me to come in here with a strike. So here come the wolf chariots, going to be coming through, threading the needle here, throwing some javelins at some blackguard, etc. But the rest of them just moving precisely through the formations, and I'm going to be going straight for this artillery crew, which got a bit too overextended as my front line starts to chase here. At the last minute, I was a little bit scared of getting enveloped by his forces, so merely all I have to do is pull out with these Marauder Ice Wolves. No, it's not necessary for me to toss them in here and get them chewed up immediately. I'm just going to pull out, and what it does is it just causes chaos in his front lines. And then over here, I'm going to continue to isolate his Dreadlord, get some shots on, and in this frontline engagement, I'm going to be a little bit careful. You can see how everything of his is collapsing down into the center. There's no real need for me to throw everything down to the center. He's gone ahead and thrown one of his sorceresses too aggressively forward to try and rebuff my main line, and I'm just going to go ahead and start snapping her up, and then collapse in on this. Oh, enfeebling foe has been popped, so I decide, okay, let's swap out these guys. Gonna go for the surround here, and the damage is still coming in, but I figure I have time on my side here. The main line is engaged, and Wulfric is just going to go for the long surround, come back in here, and maybe knock some guys up. Meanwhile, over here we have a complete and total surround happening on his guys that were chasing off my chariots. But what I decide here is, hey, there's no reason to engage this. Those Blackguard are going to be scary. So I'm just going to collapse in on the rest of his force as it's isolated. Charybdis is going to be focused on by my Famir warriors, and here I'm going to throw in a bunch of units against the Dreadlord, Skin Wolves as well. Going to be running on through, and they're going to try and gang up on the Sorceress. Meanwhile, as the main line is engaged, he will probably win this out in a straight up engagement, but I do have some numbers to come in. So here comes the rescue crew, I should say. My hounds lining up, my chariots lining up, and this is why we went wide in this build, so that we could open up the rear ranks of the enemy. And here are these Hargoneth executioners that could otherwise do so much damage, and the rest are going to be run down. Ooh, Charybdis in the background, eating some of my guys. But yeah, this is why you go wide with Norsca. These are the moments that they live for, so doing so much damage to these Hargoneth executioners. And then Wulfric coming in the back with Fight or Die. They're going to pop all sorts of boosts on my guys, and that is going to crack a lot of these units. Even the Dreadlord here, going to be isolated. Wulfric going to be pouncing in for the kill. Going to pop all sorts of abilities. Hunter of Champions to try and slow him down, and then I'm going to throw everything against this guy. And he's going to try and exfiltrate from the situation, but I've brought him super low on health, down to 1,000 health. The Charybdis unit also going to be surrounded. These Famir warriors doing really, really good. Chariots doing enough to bog down his infantry. And then on the surrounding periphery, Marauder Horsemen just told to focus fire on these key units. And the guys here that got distracted, I just dodged around them and it was no problem. These Skin Wolves have been told to take this dragon out and drag it down into the abyss. And it looks like they do get one final sweep on that dragon. I don't know if he'll be able to take off here, but just that pursuit is going to be so necessary, down to 300 health. And my Marauder Hunters look like they want to get in on some of this action. So they're going to get a volley off, and perhaps one of these spears, yep, looks like one of those did seize that prize and claim victory for my guys. So that was a very, very quick battle, but it just goes to show, a little bit of a case in point how going wide with Norsca can work out really well. So that main line, just bringing a lot of these Marauders, and then on the flanks, get something very mobile. So you can see how the chariots were used in combination with, you know, if you put kind of chariots plus marauders plus some sort of dire pack on your flanks or some warhounds, you can be very, very versatile with that, because that kind of cluster of units can plow into any infantry they find. And what they can do is they can kite any cavalry that's on that flank. Throw in maybe some skin wolves, or maybe even the Regiment of Renown Warhounds with anti-large, and that little mobile force that you can have can now take on pretty much anything or choose to disengage at any point in time. And then, you know, if they have no opposition like we had in this game, just circle around, wait for the time to be right, collapse in on the main line, and then just do a huge hammer and anvil. And you saw how it just absolutely withered the Dark Elves, and had them all on the verge of collapse and even routing by the time their special ability procced, and we had everything just melt away. So I'm really digging how powerful and how much burst damage you can put on with Norsca. So yeah, let's end the replay here. Take a look at some of the stats, and then we'll pivot on over to another battle. So yeah, lots of, well, actually not too many kills across the board here. I'm pretty surprised, but the enemy did go a little bit thin in terms of its ranks. And also, not too many kills because we just routed him off the field so substantially. These Blackguard of Nagaran here, 0 kills, almost full health. That's a ton of investment that was poured into these units. Yeah, these two here, with nothing done. Just because I led them off the battlefield and didn't engage when it wasn't necessary. And yeah, just concentration of force on these guys. Had the enemy, you know, I think he could have done a little bit better had he brought a little bit more of a wide build. Maybe Shed, definitely the Reaper Bolt Thrower. I don't think you need Charybdis. Gone with maybe a couple more Witch Elves to just beat back my front line a little bit more quickly. And then perhaps use those to try and enrage the chariots, or cause them to rampage, and then tie them down enough to get something on them. But yeah, this is, I really like the wide Norscan build. But anyways, another thing he could have done is also gone with a more kite-heavy build, and just denied my advance and picked apart my flanks. So we'll see in the next video how that type of option would have turned out. So yeah, let's pivot on over to that one. Alright, we're in the next battle, and this is actually going to be against Nagaraith, but it is going to show you what happens if you go up against a kite build. So let's take a look at what my opponent has brought to the battlefield. It's definitely a bit trolly here. So what he has is a bunch of Shadow Walkers. These guys are all Vanguard deployed and hidden to me at the moment. So he has 5 of these laid out in the front with Alithanar here. So he's preparing an ambush on this ridge, starting to knock an arrow as my guys close. And in the back he has these awesome looking kind of dark dragon princes lurking in the woods. I love the paint job on these guys. So intimidating there. And then if that weren't bad enough, in his rear he has a bunch of guys just sitting stationary. It's going to be 4 Lothern Sea Guard backed up by an Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. And then he has a mage with the Lore of Light. So it's going to be pretty scary stuff in the sense that this front line is just going to chew through anything I throw at it. And he's just going to slowly fall back to this formation here, which in and of itself, with the Lothern Sea Guard armed with the spears, can probably rebuff some of my monsters. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Anyways, my build is going to be similar to the one you saw in that last battle in the sense that I'm going wide. So it's going to have a lot of these Marauders in the front, speckled across well, both flanks. I guess I've done kind of 2 functional groups on either side, so 2 Marauders on either side, and they're going to be backed up by a Marauder Spearman and Marauder Berserkers lurking a little bit behind them on that flank. And on the left flank it's actually going to be reinforced by another Marauder unit and some Norscan Ice Wolves. So on both flanks, basically a Marauder chaff blocker in the front with something a little bit more versatile to follow that up. So here the Norscan Ice Wolves, and on that flank Norscan Warhounds. On the right flank what I have is perhaps a little bit more heavy hitting, the Famir Warriors. I put them over here so we could use, because they're slower and more vulnerable to missiles, I wanted to put them on the side with a bit more forest. And then I also have the Norscan Ice Wolves to push up the right flank. Now in the center what I have is something a little bit more mobile to punch up through the middle. 2 Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, and then the Beasts of Teshnar here, the anti-large Regiment of Renowned Warhounds, which is great. Then Wulfric the Wanderer with another pair of Marauder Chariots. And then what I've also brought, which was interesting, is the Skin Wolf Werekin guy. So he's pretty good in the sense that he has an ability that to nearby forces actually gives them more armor. So I figured against Nagarythe, having a lord like this who can give more armor to my guys who are going to be taking a lot of fire is going to be key, as well as the fact that he's very fast, nimble, and I believe can regenerate. So he's going to be able to come in, knock guys about, tie them down, at least long enough to allow my main force to come in, and then he can pull out and regen. Anyways, the enemy is going to start to get engaged, and Uthanar here has created a copy of himself. And so he's going to be moving forward, so this is kind of funny to see. My guys are mostly going to ignore him as we continue to charge up the hill, but I figured I'd turn around a little bit just to get rid of this guy. I got a little bit tricked for a second because Uthanar was stalking there, but now I've spotted him, so I was a little bit worried, like, okay, is this a real guy? And now that I see him up on the hill, I'm like, yeah, there's no way this is a real one. So I'm going to finish this, this fake sprite off pretty quick and then get back to the main engagement. Meanwhile, he's going to start to pull back to his guys, but you can see these ice wolves being very, very quick, and they've been able to pounce on the enemy, and whoever they sink their teeth on is going to be frostbitten, which means that they're going to be slowed down. That effect should pile on for a little bit. I am also diving in here with some Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, putting everything in here just to take out his archers, and this means that there's going to be a lot of punishing fire from the rear, coming up and over and knocking out my guys. But at this point, I don't really care. I just have to throw numbers at him and just do as much damage to his front line as possible. So it seems to be working. Wulfric on his chariot is even in here as well. And he does cast a net. So this build here from my opponent, definitely trying to be very kitey, netting down a huge chunk of my forces, and then coming in with his archers to silence them and destroy them. So this could be pretty bad for me. So he's going to see off my Marauder Horseman. Luckily, I did bring in my Skin Wolf here, so though he can't move, he is going to be buffing up the armor on some of my guys, so helping them withstand that barrage. But meanwhile, the left flank is continuing to push forward a lot of my chaff here, chasing them off. So we're going to be throwing that in. And then the right flank is going to be slowly slinking through the woods. They're all going to be hidden here, but let's watch this Norscan war party as it stealthily tries to make its way through the woods. And then the ice wolves. That's not a cloud, that's not frost, that's not fog. It is a horde of dogs coming out of the woodlands straight for you. And they're going to be coming after these Lothern Seaguard who are notching their arrows at the predetermined killing field, not expecting wolves to come out of left field here. And decide not to take the engagement because you can see these guys were ready to whip out their spears. So instead, I'm just going to arc around. I'm going to try and take out this piece of Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. So he just didn't have enough troops to rout me, or sorry, to prevent that wrap. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock it out, and then here comes the rest of my guys pouring out of the woods, gonna hit these archers who are turning their back on me. Meanwhile, over here he is continuing to kite. I've taken a decent chunk out of his guys, but so has he. So you can see I've lost a couple units. One of them is going to be a chariot. Two of them are going to be these Marauder Horsemen, but that's okay. I don't really need them for the battle. They were just meant to tie down the enemy, which is good because that's what I have now. And then I'm going to be able to throw them back into the fight. So these guys got to be, you know, careful of who's coming back from the fight and definitely recommit them. Meanwhile, over here, I do have his Dragon Princes who were kind of pulled in here to rebuff this assault. But unfortunately, these Ice Wolves have been able to drag them down with their slow. And my opponent here, desperate to prevent from being surrounded, is trying to pull out with his Dragon Princes, but really not able to. And so now we're going to be able to surround these guys and eat up this healthy unit pretty easily. And here you go, the Skin Wolf with his high speed going to be helping out a lot. And then I'm just going to keep throwing bodies at this front line. Here comes Wulfric. Gonna lead the charge with the chariot. Bowling through this, and we should have more units kind of up behind him. Let's get a nice little view on that. And they get a net, so they're going to try and throw everything at Wulfric. A little bit scary on my end because my guys aren't back in time. But luckily on this front, we are completely surrounding his guys. I've poured a bit too much. You can see 3 units densely packed against his Lothern Seaguard. You definitely want to just commit 1 or 2 and then peel off the 3rd one to go around the flank. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with these Marauder Berserkers. Very good in melee. They're going to be tying that one down. But I have some free units, and you can see here my dogs were focus fired down and taken out. So if he can reform the rear lines and then here continue to snipe at my guys, this can be pretty deadly. We'll see how this goes. But luckily, I do still have some chariots, and they're going to be free to get around the side, try and take out his guys. And here comes the crush. of his units. Luckily, he is going to be up here against the border of the map, so he can't get too far away from me. And then Wulfric has pulled himself free, and now we're going to get these guys in our grasp. And luckily, Alethanar is a little bit squishy, so maybe we'll circle around with this Skin Wolf and just dogpile on top of him. It looks like Hera is a little bit worried about these Dragon Princes coming back around, so I toggled him to charge into them, get them off the battlefield, and yeah, just more and more ranks of Norsca to pour through. We break these Lothern Sea Guards, so now the gates are open and we can charge right on through, and my guys who were previously routing are going to once again come back and knock about the rear ranks of the enemy. Let's look at this glorious charge through the center. Alethanar has been caged by the ice, and then here we're going to come in and just nuke him to oblivion. I believe he already went down with that blow. Oh no, he's still alive. Pretty decent health, but his armor has been really run down. Oh my god, and look at this. Lothern Sea Guard holding up decently, but the chariot play too strong on these, and so fun. So yeah, if you can hold off on the chariots long enough to wait till the enemy is engaged and then thread the needle and hit the backs of the enemy blobs, you're gonna get so many kills with those guys. Already at 42, that's pretty good, and they're just gonna continue to tear through. And now that my opponent is completely tied down on every front, I just have the extra numbers, and he's gonna be escorted off the battlefield. And here we're going to take out Mage of Light and Alethanar wherever he's standing. I think he might have died actually already. But yeah, another very quick victory for Norsca here. So you can see, again, going wide and the rush, and especially the surround, is just going to seal you these victories very quickly. So yeah, I'll continue to upload some battles of me as Norsca and show you kind of the different scenarios that I find myself in and see if this wide build does play out or how you can tweak it. But yeah, so far it's been proving very beneficial for me. So let's end this replay and take a look at this. So still a fair amount of damage with his Shadow Walkers, but the investment on those is very heavy considering they're trading against, you know, a lot of front line of Marauders, which are way cheaper, and Marauder Horsemen, which are still relatively good fodder units that I didn't care too much about. Same thing with the Norscan Warhound. So all of this is very cheap chaff. So I think the best way to deal with this would be, I think Norsca's main threat will be, you know, maybe a bit more Kev heavy. So I would have, you know, thrown away a couple of these Shadow Walkers for more heavy Dragon Princes. And what those guys could do is if I throw chaff at them, Dragon Princes are just going to come in and they're going to knock about these Marauders, and they can get out of that fight pretty quickly. And even if it's sustained combat, it's going to necessitate that I throw something at it in exchange. So that would require me to have some Familiar, other units to dedicate to those Dragon Princes, but bringing a couple more Dragon Princes is going to force my hand. And the second I then dedicate resources to go after those Dragon Princes, that's when you target the rest of your archers at those big monsters. And if you use your net in combination to that to, you know, exfiltrate your Dragon Princes, you can get a lot more versatility. So I think one of the things you could do if you're facing Norsca, go a little bit more cavalry heavy, and you'll have a lot better results. So this is one of the things that maybe I'll be uploading in the future, is maybe Norsca versus Bretonnia. That could be interesting. So yeah, see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace out.